the shocking truth why just be yourself is bad advice. In this video, we're going to break down one of the most overused, misleading, and potentially dangerous pieces of advice out there: just be yourself. I know it sounds like I'm attacking something sacred, but stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to see why this advice can actually hold you back. Let's start by asking the obvious question: what does it even mean to just be yourself? On the surface, it sounds empowering. It feels like a call to authenticity, to embrace who you are, flaws and all. But here's where things get tricky. Who are you really? Are we ever just one self or one fixed identity? Or are we constantly evolving, growing and changing? If someone tells you to just be yourself, they're assuming that there's a static, unchangeable core of who you are, something you can tap into that's solid, reliable, and consistent. But the truth is, we're never one single self. We're a collection of experiences, memories, habits, and emotions that are constantly shifting. Yourself today is not the same as yourself 5 years ago, and it won't be the same 5 years from now. So, when people tell you to just be yourself, they're giving you advice that keeps you stuck in a snapshot of who you were at one particular moment. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous. What if the self you're told to embrace is full of limitations? What if it's shaped by fear, insecurity, or bad habits? Telling someone to be themselves when they're in a bad place mentally or emotionally is like giving them permission to stay stuck. Imagine telling someone who struggles with procrastination, just be yourself, or telling someone who's afraid of taking risks. Just be yourself. You're basically reinforcing the idea that they don't need to change, grow, or push beyond their comfort zone. Let me ask you a deep question. How often do you hide behind the idea of being yourself as an excuse to avoid growth? I mean, think about it. How many times have you said, "That's just who I am," to justify a behavior that you know doesn't serve you? Maybe you're bad at deadlines. Maybe you're shy in social situations. Maybe you avoid conflict. And you tell yourself, well, that's just me, but is it? Or is it a version of you that you've accepted because it feels safer to stay the same than to challenge yourself, to risk failure, or to step into the unknown? Here's the shocking truth: just be yourself is often a way to avoid the discomfort of becoming who you could be. The real growth, the real transformation, happens when you stop clinging to a fixed idea of who you are and start asking, who can I become?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's look at it from another angle. If you're always yourself, how will you ever adapt to new situations? Life is full of moments where we need to evolve. We don't stay in the same job, the same relationships, the same mindset forever. If you're always just being yourself, you're not leaving room for the possibility that your best self is one that's still being created. You're not allowing yourself to outgrow the parts of you that no longer serve your future. And here's another problem: just be yourself assumes that your identity is completely self-contained. But the truth is, we are deeply influenced by the people around us, by our environment, by the culture we live in. Who we are is in constant dialogue with the world. So when you're told to just be yourself, it ignores the fact that yourself is shaped by external forces. If you grew up in a certain family, in a certain town, with certain beliefs, your sense of self is already a product of those influences. To just be yourself is to ignore the possibility that you've been conditioned by these forces in ways you don't even realize. Let me ask you this: what if the self you've been told to embrace isn't truly yours? What if it's a patchwork of other people's expectations, of societal norms, of inherited beliefs that you never chose for yourself? The advice to just be yourself can be limiting because it doesn't encourage you to question where that self came from. It assumes that you already know who you are, when in reality, discovering yourself is a lifelong process that involves shedding layers of conditioning, doubt, and fear. And this brings us to a profound realization: the goal of life isn't to just be yourself, it's to constantly transcend yourself. It's about becoming the version of you that is most aligned with your deepest values, your highest aspirations, and your fullest potential. And sometimes, that process requires you to let go of the idea of being yourself and embrace the uncertainty of who you're becoming. Let's take a moment to reflect. If you could redefine yourself without any limitations, without clinging to your past, what kind of person would you become? What qualities would you develop? What fears would you face? What dreams would you pursue? This is where the real power lies, not in being who you've always been, but in daring to become someone you've never been before. The pursuit of growth. Why being yourself limits your potential? All right. Now that we've dismantled the idea of just be yourself as a fixed and limiting concept, let's talk about the pursuit of growth. Growth is a process of change, and change inherently challenges the idea of a fixed self. If we cling to the idea of simply being ourselves, we might actually be telling ourselves that we don't need to change, that we're fine as we are. But growth requires discomfort, transformation, and, at times, a complete reimagining of who we think we are. Here's a question to consider: what if the current version of yourself is only a fraction of your potential? If you define yourself by your past experiences, your current habits, or the roles you've always played, you're limiting your trajectory. You're boxing yourself into the person you've been rather than opening up to the person you could become. And this is where the danger of just be yourself becomes crystal clear. It encourages you to settle. Think about it: the most successful, transformative people in the world didn't get there by simply being themselves. They got there by reinventing themselves, by pushing beyond their perceived limits, and by constantly striving to become better versions of who they were. And whether it's athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, or even philosophers, these people didn't sit back and say, "I'm good as I am." They recognized that becoming great meant transcending who they were yesterday. Let's take personal development as an example. If you struggle with certain habits, let's say procrastination, self-doubt, or even a lack of discipline, telling yourself to just be yourself is like giving yourself permission to continue with those behaviors. You're essentially saying, "This is who I am, and I don't need to change." But what if those habits, those parts of yourself that you're holding on to, are the very things blocking you from success? Here's another deep question: what parts of yourself are you holding on to that are no longer serving you? Maybe it's an old narrative about who you are. Maybe it's a fear of failure or rejection. Maybe it's a limiting belief that you've carried for years. If you strictly adhere to just being yourself, you leave no room for breaking free from these chains. You stagnate. You stop evolving. Let's dig into this further. Growth is uncomfortable by nature. It requires you to stretch beyond your comfort zone, to confront the parts of yourself that are underdeveloped, and to challenge the very identity you've grown used to. But this is where true transformation happens. If you're unwilling to push beyond the boundaries of who you think you are, you'll never discover what you're truly capable of. This is why the advice to just be yourself can be so misleading. It's comfortable. It feels safe. It's like saying, "Don't worry about it. You're fine the way you are." But comfort is the enemy of growth. If we really want to unlock our potential, we have to be willing to let go of that comfort. We have to be willing to reinvent ourselves to become something more than we are today. Now, here's the flip side: being yourself doesn't mean abandoning authenticity. Let's be clear, authenticity is important. But authenticity doesn't mean staying the same. It means being true to your deepest values while allowing yourself to evolve, to grow, and to become more aligned with the person you're capable of being. Authenticity is about integrity, not stagnation. So here's the challenge: can you be both authentic and open to transformation? Can you hold on to your core values while allowing yourself to evolve, to change your habits, to develop new skills, and to challenge old beliefs? This is where the real magic happens, not in just being yourself, but in becoming the best version of yourself. Identity is a fluid process. Why you're always becoming so. We've established that sticking to just being yourself can hold you back, and that growth requires pushing beyond your current identity. But now, let's dive even deeper into the idea of identity itself. What if your identity isn't a fixed thing at all? What if who you are isn't something static, but something fluid, something that's always in the process of becoming? Think about it this way: who you are today is the result of countless influences, decisions, and experiences. You weren't born with the same mindset, beliefs, or habits you have now. Over time, you've evolved. You've picked up ideas from your upbringing, your culture, your friends, your education. You've adapted to circumstances, overcome challenges, and responded to opportunities. In short, you've been shaped by life. So, the idea that you should just be yourself assumes that there's a core, unchanging you somewhere in there. But what if that's not the case? Here's a powerful question: if your identity is always evolving, does it even make sense to cling to who you are right now? If you hold too tightly to one version of yourself, you might miss out on the opportunity to become a more complete, more fulfilled version. Identity, in this sense, isn't a destination, it's a journey. You're always in the process of becoming, of shifting, of growing. Let's take a closer look at how this works. Every decision you make, every new experience you have, changes you in some way. When you embrace a new challenge, learn a new skill, or step out of your comfort zone, you're not just adding layers to your personality, you're reshaping it. The person you were before the challenge is different from the person you are after. This constant reshaping is what makes life dynamic and exciting. But if you stick to the idea of just being yourself, you limit this process. You become attached to old versions of yourself, even when they no longer serve your growth. Here's the tricky part: many of us fear change because it feels like losing control of who we are. We're afraid that if we let go of certain aspects of our identity, we'll lose ourselves. But the reality is, we're already changing all the time. The danger isn't in changing, it's in resisting change. When we resist change, we trap ourselves in outdated versions of me. We cling to old habits, old mindsets, even when they no longer align with where we want to go. Let me ask you this: what parts of your current identity are you afraid to let go of, even though you know they're holding you back? Maybe it's a fear of failure that keeps you from taking risks. Maybe it's a sense of pride in being independent, even when that independence stops you from asking for help when you need it. Maybe it's the belief that you're not good with people when deep down you want to connect more with others. These are all parts of your current identity that might feel safe or familiar, but they're not necessarily serving your growth. This brings us to a profound realization: identity isn't something you discover once and hold on to forever. It's something that's constantly evolving, and the most powerful thing you can do is to embrace that evolution. Instead of focusing on being yourself, focus on becoming the person who is more aligned with your values, more in tune with your purpose, and more capable of handling the challenges life throws at you. So, here's the challenge for you: can you see your identity as fluid rather than fixed? Can you let go of the need to define yourself in rigid terms and instead embrace the idea that you're always in the process of becoming? When you do this, the fear of change starts to dissolve. You stop worrying about losing yourself because you realize that who you are is always shifting. And in that realization, you find freedom to grow, to adapt, and to become the best version of yourself over and over again. The power of reinvention, breaking free from the illusion of a fixed self as we move forward. We've uncovered a key insight: who you are is not fixed, rather, you are always in the process of becoming. So, what does this understanding lead to? It leads to one of the most powerful tools we have as human beings: the ability to reinvent ourselves. If identity is fluid, and if we're always growing, changing, and evolving, then we have the freedom to become whoever we choose to be. But here's the question: how often do we actually give ourselves permission to reinvent who we are? Too often we get stuck in the illusion of a fixed self. We tell ourselves stories about who we are, stories that may have served us at one point, but now hold us back. Maybe you tell yourself that you're not creative, or that you don't have leadership skills, or that you're too introverted to pursue something bold. These stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. They shape your decisions, limit your potential, and keep you locked in an outdated version of yourself. Here's a deep question for you. What if the story you've been telling yourself about who you are is a lie? What if those limitations, those labels, and those aspects of your identity that you've clung to for so long are nothing more than illusions? What if they're simply constructs that you've created or accepted from others, and they don't reflect the full range of who you can become? The truth is, reinvention is not only possible, it's essential. To grow, to thrive, and to truly live a fulfilling life, you must be willing to let go of old versions of yourself. You must be willing to break free from the identity that no longer serves you. This doesn't mean abandoning who you are at your core. It means shedding the layers that are holding you back and stepping into a version of yourself that's more aligned with your highest potential. Think about some of the most successful, impactful people in history. Were they born with their greatness fully intact, or did they reinvent themselves over and over again? Reinvention is the key to transformation. It's about adapting, evolving, and becoming the person you need to be in order to achieve your goals, live your purpose, and make your mark on the world. But reinvention requires courage. It requires you to confront the fear of the unknown. When you let go of an old identity, you step into uncertainty. You don't know exactly who you will become, and that can be terrifying. But here's the thing: the unknown is where all growth happens. It's where new possibilities emerge. It's where you discover strengths, talents, and parts of yourself that you never knew existed. If you cling to the safety of just being yourself, you miss out on the opportunity to evolve into something greater. Let me ask you this: what would happen if you gave yourself permission to reinvent who you are right now? What would you let go of? What new qualities would you embrace? How would your life change if you stopped holding on to the old version of yourself and allowed yourself to evolve into someone new? Here's the profound realization: you are not defined by your past. The person you were yesterday does not have to be the person you are tomorrow. You can rewrite your narrative at any time. Reinvention is not about disregarding your history, it's about learning from it and then using that wisdom to shape a new future. It's about being intentional with your growth, about deciding who you want to become and then taking the steps to get there. So, here's the final challenge: are you willing to break free from the illusion of a fixed self? Are you willing to let go of the outdated stories you've been telling yourself and step into the unknown? Because that's where your true potential lies, not in just being yourself, but in constantly becoming the best version of yourself. Reinvention isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifelong process. And the moment you embrace it, you unlock the power to create a life that's not limited by your past, but defined by your vision for the future. This is the shocking truth: just be yourself is bad advice because it keeps you small. The real advice is this: become who you were always meant to be and never stop evolving. That's where true freedom, growth, and greatness are found. And the best part, you get to decide who that person will be.